Sup Reddit, my name's Jake, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had life pretty much figured out. I'd been married to my wife, Emily, for 8 years. We had what I thought was a rock-solid marriage, dinners with inside jokes, weekends with our friends, and a life filled with what seemed like genuine love. We even had this tight-knit group of friends. The cornerstone of it was me and my best friend, Mike. Mike and I grew up together, played football in high school, and even survived college dorm life as roommates. He was practically family, the kind of guy who'd drop everything if you needed help. His wife, Lisa, was Emily's closest friend, so we all fit together like pieces of a puzzle. But looking back, that's where I was blind. Comfortable. Ignoring all the small signs because I trusted the people closest to me. It started with Emily acting different. She was more glued to her phone than ever, constantly giggling at something on her screen. "Just TikToks," she'd say, brushing it off. I noticed the late nights out with the girls, the shift in her energy, the distance between us. You'd think I'd catch on right away, right? But nah. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I figured she was just stressed or maybe going through a phase. That was mistake number 1. Meanwhile, Mike was around more than usual, and at first, I appreciated it. He'd swing by for beers or invite me out for golf. Sometimes he'd stop by when I wasn't home to chat with Emily about some surprise they were planning for me. I didn't think much of it. I mean, this was Mike. My best friend. If there was anyone I trusted as much as Emily, it was him. But that trust? It was about to be annihilated. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I started noticing more cracks in the picture-perfect life I thought I had. Emily began nitpicking me over the smallest things. "Do you ever pay attention to the details?" she snapped one night when I brought home the wrong brand of pasta. Normally, we'd laugh off stuff like that, but she looked genuinely irritated. At first, I figured it was stress. I mean, Emily's job was demanding, and I'd been working long hours too. But then, her complaints started becoming more personal. "You don't listen to me," she said one evening after I zoned out during a conversation about redecorating the living room. "Do you even care anymore?" That hit me hard. Of course I cared. But her tone wasn't just frustrated, it was cold. Detached. Meanwhile, Mike kept popping up. He was overly involved in every aspect of our lives. He'd drop by unannounced, grab a drink from the fridge like he lived there, and tell me he was just passing through. Emily never seemed bothered by it. If anything, she encouraged it. One Saturday, we were hosting a barbecue for our friends. It was one of those warm, sunny afternoons where the kids ran around the backyard while the adults lounged with beers. I was flipping burgers on the grill when I saw Mike and Emily talking off to the side, laughing at something. She playfully smacked his arm, and he leaned in closer. It was subtle, so subtle that anyone else might have missed it. But the way she touched his arm lingered just a little too long. The way he looked at her felt different. I brushed it off. I mean, they were just friends, right? Emily was friendly with everyone, and Mike was Mike, charming, confident, always cracking jokes. Still, the image of them standing too close stuck with me the rest of the night. Things escalated during a random weeknight. Emily had been staying late at work more often, and when she came home that evening, she had this glowing, flustered look about her. I asked her how her day went, and she just smiled vaguely, mumbling something about deadlines. But when I leaned in for a kiss, she turned her head, letting me kiss her cheek instead. That was the first time I really felt it, like something was slipping away. Later that night, while she was in the shower, I sat on the couch, replaying the day in my head. My gut was telling me something was wrong, but I still didn't have proof. Then her phone buzzed. I glanced at it out of instinct, and there it was, a text from Mike. "Mike. Had a great time today. Can't wait to see you again soon." The blood drained from my face. That text from Mike? It was like a bomb went off in my brain. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind racing. Had a great time today. What did that even mean? My wife was supposed to be at work all day. And the winky face? That wasn't how you text someone's wife, not unless there was something happening you didn't want anyone to know about. But I didn't jump to conclusions right then and there. I couldn't. What if I was wrong? I'd been friends with Mike for over 20 years. Emily and I had been married almost a decade. If I said something and it turned out to be nothing, I'd look paranoid. Still, the weight of that message sat heavy on my chest, like a rock I couldn't dislodge. The next day, I decided to test the waters. Over breakfast, I casually asked Emily how her day at work had been. She barely looked up from her coffee. "Same as always," she muttered, scrolling through her phone. "Anything exciting happen?" I pressed, keeping my voice light. She glanced at me for a second, then back to her screen. "Not really. Just the usual meetings." My heart sank. If there had been something to tell me, she would have mentioned it, right? "By the way," I added, trying to sound casual, "Mike texted me last night." Her reaction was quick, too quick. She flinched, her hand pausing mid-scroll. "Oh?" she said, her tone just a little too even. "What did he say?" I shrugged, watching her carefully. "Something about grabbing beers this weekend." She relaxed, but only slightly. "Cool," she said, sipping her coffee. But her eyes didn't meet mine. It wasn't much, but it was enough to light a fire under my suspicions. That weekend, I decided to keep a closer eye on things. We all went out as a group, me, Emily, Mike, and Lisa, grabbing drinks at our usual spot. I played it cool, but I was watching every interaction like a hawk. It didn't take long for me to notice it again. Emily and Mike sat a little too close at the table. Their laughter was too private, like they were sharing a joke no one else understood. At one point, Emily leaned in to whisper something to him, and the way he smiled back made my stomach churn. Lisa, Mike's wife, didn't seem to notice. She was scrolling through her phone, completely oblivious to the tension simmering just beneath the surface. I tried to act normal, but inside I was boiling. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Emily and I were lying in bed. She was scrolling through her phone, again. I stared at the ceiling, the questions pounding in my head. Finally, I broke the silence. "You've been spending a lot of time with Mike lately." Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said quickly, not wanting to push too hard. "I just noticed, that's all." She rolled her eyes and turned back to her phone. "Don't be ridiculous, Jake. Mike's your best friend. He's just around a lot. You're imagining things." That's dumb. Not because of her words, but because of the way she said them, so dismissive, so cold. But I didn't say anything else. I just lay there in the dark, feeling the distance between us grow. The next few weeks were brutal. Emily was out of the house more than ever, always with some excuse about work or errands. And when she was home, she barely spoke to me. Mike, on the other hand, was more present than ever. He'd stop by unannounced, cracking jokes and acting like everything was fine. But I wasn't fine. One night, while Emily was out, I sat alone in the living room with a glass of whiskey, staring at her phone on the coffee table. She'd left it unlocked, something she never used to do. I hesitated, my heart pounding. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband rifling through his wife's phone. But then I remembered that text from Mike, and all the pieces that didn't add up. I picked it up and started scrolling. There was nothing obvious. Just work emails, texts with her sister, and a group chat with some of her friends. But then I saw a thread with Mike, and my blood ran cold. Most of it was harmless, memes, jokes, and little updates about mutual plans. But the tone was off. Too playful. Too familiar. And then I saw it. "Mike. Can't stop thinking about last time." Last time? What last time? I heard the sound of Emily's car pulling into the driveway and quickly set the phone down. My hands were shaking, my mind spinning. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I needed more proof. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, those words haunted me. Can't stop thinking about last time. What the hell did that mean? Was it just a poorly worded joke? Or was it exactly what it sounded like? A confession, a glimpse into something I wasn't supposed to see? Emily came to bed an hour after she got home, acting like everything was normal. She slipped under the covers and turned her back to me, scrolling on her phone like usual. I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight with suspicion and doubt. I wanted to grab her phone again. To confront her. To demand answers. But every time I opened my mouth to speak, the words got caught in my throat. What if I was wrong? What if I accused her of something and it backfired? So I said nothing. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. I watched Emily's every move, every expression, every word she said to Mike. I knew I was being obsessive, but I couldn't help it. Something was off, and my gut wasn't letting it go. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from Lisa, Mike's wife. "Hey, Jake," she said cheerfully. "I was just wondering if you and Emily are free Friday night. Mike and I were thinking of doing a double date. It's been a while since the four of us hung out." I froze. A double date? The thought of sitting across from Emily and Mike, pretending everything was fine, made my stomach turn. Yeah? I stammered. "Let me check with Emily, but that should work." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. A double date wasn't just a casual dinner anymore. It was an opportunity. That Friday, we met up at a nice restaurant downtown. Emily looked stunning, as always, her hair perfectly curled, her dress hugging her in all the right places. Mike showed up looking sharp too, wearing his signature confident grin. Lisa, sweet and unsuspecting as ever, was all smiles. The first half of the dinner was normal enough. Small talk, laughter, wine flowing freely. But I wasn't really paying attention to the conversation. I was watching the way Emily leaned just a little too close to Mike when she laughed at one of his jokes. Watching the way his hand briefly brushed hers when he reached for the bread basket. I tried to focus on Lisa, on the way she beamed when she talked about her kids, on the sparkle in her eye when she teased Mike about his golf addiction. She was so genuine, so kind. My heart ached for her because deep down, I suspected she didn't know. But I wasn't ready to say anything. Not yet. After dinner, we all walked out to the parking lot together. Lisa suggested grabbing drinks at their place, but Emily quickly declined. "I'm exhausted," she said, feigning a yawn. "Maybe another time?" Mike shot her a quick glance, and for a split second, I saw something unspoken pass between them. It was like a punch to the gut. Back at home, I finally decided to push a little harder. Emily was brushing her teeth, and I stood in the doorway of the bathroom, my arms crossed. "You and Mike seem pretty close these days," I said casually, watching her reflection in the mirror. She froze for half a second before recovering, spitting out toothpaste and rinsing her mouth. "What are you talking about?" "I don't know," I said, shrugging. "It just seems like you've been spending a lot of time with him. That's all." Emily turned to face me, her expression carefully neutral. "Jake, are you seriously jealous of Mike? He's your best friend." "That's ridiculous." "Am I?" I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. "Because he's texting you a lot. And some of those texts, they don't seem like things a guy should be saying to another man's wife." Her face flushed, her eyes narrowing. "Have you been going through my phone?" "I saw the messages, Emily," I said, my voice cold. "I know something's going on." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "Unbelievable. You're snooping through my phone now? You're acting paranoid, Jake. Mike and I are just friends." "That's it." Her words stung, but it wasn't the denial that got to me, it was the way she said it. She wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. She was mocking me, like I was the crazy one for even thinking something might be wrong. "Maybe you should start paying more attention to your own behavior instead of inventing problems that don't exist," she snapped, brushing past me on her way to the bedroom. I stood there, stunned, as the bathroom door swung shut behind her. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed her words in my head. Was I paranoid? Was I seeing things that weren't there? Or was Emily just that good at lying? But deep down I knew. This wasn't paranoia. This was betrayal, creeping in like a shadow I couldn't escape. The morning after our argument, Emily acted like nothing had happened. She was cheerful, humming while she brewed her coffee, scrolling through her phone like it didn't hold 1,000 secrets. I sat at the kitchen table, my eyes burning from lack of sleep, watching her like she was a stranger. "Hey, I'm meeting up with the girls tonight," she said casually, pouring herself a cup. "Oh yeah?" I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Yeah," she said, barely glancing at me. "Dinner, drinks, you know the drill." But I didn't know the drill anymore. Because lately, every time she said, "the girls," I pictured Mike. "Sounds fun," I muttered. She left for work a few minutes later, giving me a quick peck on the cheek before heading out the door. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the half-empty coffee mug she'd left behind. I couldn't keep living like this, caught between suspicion and denial, spiraling into paranoia while Emily acted like nothing was wrong. I needed answers. That evening, when Emily left for her girls' night, I made a decision. I was going to follow her. I waited until her car was out of sight, then grabbed my keys and jumped into my truck. My heart was pounding as I drove down the street, keeping a careful distance. This felt insane, like something out of a bad soap opera. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to find something I wasn't supposed to see. Emily drove across town, not to the restaurant where she usually met her friends, but to a small park. My chest tightened as I parked a few spaces away, ducking down so she wouldn't see me. I watched as she got out of the car, looking around nervously before pulling out her phone. A few moments later, another car pulled up, a sleek black SUV. And then, stepping out of the driver's side, was Mike. My stomach dropped. They didn't hug or touch or anything like that, but the way they looked at each other was enough. They stood close, talking quietly, their heads leaning in together. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but it didn't matter. The sight of them alone, meeting in secret like this, was enough to confirm everything I'd been dreading. I snapped a photo with my phone. But just as I was about to drive off, something unexpected happened. Emily glanced around the parking lot, then whispered something to Mike. Suddenly, they both got into his car and drove off. I hesitated for a moment before following them. If they were meeting up in private, I wanted to know where. They drove for a while, eventually pulling into the parking lot of a cheap motel on the edge of town. My chest was tight, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I watched as they walked into the lobby together, Emily's head down like she didn't want to be seen. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife, sneaking into a motel with my best friend. My mind was racing. Part of me wanted to barge in there, to catch them red-handed and demand answers. But another part of me wanted to wait, to see how far this would go. So, I sat there in the parking lot, watching the minutes tick by. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 30. But they never came back out. Instead, a third person walked into the motel, a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a leather jacket. He looked around the lot before heading inside, his expression tense. "What the hell is going on?" I muttered to myself. After about an hour, the three of them finally emerged, Emily, Mike, and the mystery man. Emily looked pale, like she'd seen a ghost, while Mike kept glancing over his shoulder like he was expecting someone to jump out and attack them. They got into their respective cars and drove off without a word, heading in different directions. I sat there stunned. This wasn't just an affair. It was something bigger, something I couldn't even begin to understand. What the hell had I just stumbled into? That night, when Emily came home, she was unusually quiet. She didn't even ask me how my day had been, just muttered something about being tired and went straight to bed. I followed her, standing in the doorway of the bedroom, watching as she pulled the covers up to her chin and turned away from me. I wanted to ask her where she'd been. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But something about the look in her eyes stopped me. She wasn't just hiding something, she was scared. And for the first time, I wondered if I was stepping into something far more dangerous than I'd anticipated. The night after the motel, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily walking into that lobby with Mike, her head low like she was ashamed, or worse, like she thought I'd never find out. But the stranger? That was what gnawed at me the most. Who was he? What was his connection to Emily and Mike? My gut told me he wasn't just some random third wheel. He was important to whatever secret they were hiding. The next morning, Emily was already up, sipping coffee at the kitchen table when I walked in. She didn't even look at me. "You were home late last night," I said, testing the waters. She glanced up, her expression tight. "Yeah. The girls' night ran long. We ended up at Julia's house, just talking." I stared at her, waiting for her to flinch, to slip up, but she didn't. Her lie was so smooth, so effortless, that it sent a chill down my spine. "Must have been some conversation," I muttered, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "It was," she said, standing up and grabbing her purse. "I'm running late for work. See you tonight." And just like that, she was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts, and the suffocating realization that my wife was a stranger to me now. I couldn't just sit there and let her lies pile up. I needed to know the truth. That afternoon, I called Lisa, hoping for some kind of clarity. "Hey, Jake," she said brightly. "What's up?" "Hey, Lisa. Quick question, did Emily mention anything about seeing Mike last night?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. No. Why would she? He was home with me all night. We watched that terrible reality show he loves, the one with the couples arguing. You know the one." My heart dropped. Mike hadn't even bothered to cover his tracks. "Oh, right," I said, forcing a laugh. "I just thought I saw his car when I was driving around. Must have been someone else." "Probably," Lisa said, chuckling. "Mike's car is pretty common. Anyway, how's Emily? She seemed stressed last time we talked." "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. "She's busy." That night, Emily came home later than usual, claiming she'd had to stay late for a work project. But there was no trace of stress on her face. If anything, she looked energized, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright. I couldn't take it anymore. "I know you weren't with the girls last night," I said bluntly as she stepped into the kitchen. She froze, her hand halfway to the fridge. "What?" "I know you weren't with the girls," I repeated, my voice low but steady. "So where were you?" Her face hardened in an instant. "Are you spying on me now?" "Don't turn this around on me, Emily," I snapped. "Just tell me the truth." She crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You're being paranoid, Jake." "Am I?" I said, stepping closer. "Because Lisa said Mike was home all night. So, unless you've got another Mike in your life, you've got some explaining to do." Her eyes darted to the side, just for a moment, but it was enough to confirm everything. "Unbelievable," she muttered, shaking her head. "You're losing it, Jake. I can't even go out without being interrogated like a criminal." I stared at her, my chest tightening. "Just admit it, Emily. Something's going on." She pushed past me, heading toward the bedroom. "I'm not doing this with you," she said, slamming the door behind her. The next day, I decided to take things a step further. I called in sick to work and drove to her office, parking a few blocks away. If she was lying about work, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Sure enough, around lunchtime, Emily walked out of the building, not alone. She was with the stranger from the motel. The tall guy in the leather jacket. They didn't hold hands or anything, but the way they walked, close, heads tilted toward each other, set my blood boiling. I followed them as they walked to a nearby cafe and sat at an outdoor table. I couldn't hear their conversation, but the body language was undeniable. Emily was nervous, fidgeting with her hands, while the man leaned in, speaking quietly and gesturing toward a folder on the table. What the hell was in that folder? Later that evening, While Emily was in the shower, I checked her bag. My hands shook as I rummaged through her things, desperate for answers. And there it was, a manila folder tucked into the side pocket, filled with papers. Divorce papers. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The papers weren't signed yet, but they were real. My name was all over them, along with a long list of financial disclosures. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. The stranger wasn't just some guy. He was a lawyer, her lawyer. Finding those divorce papers felt like getting punched in the gut. My mind was racing. Emily wasn't just lying to me, she was planning to destroy me. The lawyer, the motel meeting, the secrecy, it all clicked. But one piece of the puzzle still didn't fit: Mike. Why was he involved in this? Was he just helping her, or was there more to it? I couldn't keep all this to myself anymore. I needed to talk to someone who'd understand what it felt like to have your world ripped apart by betrayal. And there was only one person who came to mind: Lisa. The next day, I called her. "Hey, Lisa," I said, trying to sound casual. "Got a minute to talk?" "Of course," she replied, her voice warm. "What's up?" "It's about Mike and Emily," I said hesitantly, not wanting to show my hand too soon. There was a pause. "What about them? Can we meet?" I asked. "It's kind of a lot. I think it's better if we talk in person." Lisa agreed, and we decided to meet at a quiet coffee shop on the other side of town. When I walked in, Lisa was already there, sipping a latte and scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, but her expression quickly turned serious when she noticed the look on my face. "Jake," she said, setting her cup down. "You're scaring me. What's going on?" I sat down across from her, my hands shaking. "I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to come out with it. I think Mike and Emily are involved." Her face froze, the color draining from her cheeks. "What are you talking about?" "I've been noticing things," I said, my voice low. "The way they act around each other. The lies Emily's been telling me. I even followed them once. They met up at a motel." Lisa's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. "You're kidding." "I wish I were," I said bitterly. "And it's not just that. I found divorce papers in Emily's bag. She's been meeting with a lawyer, Lisa. I think she's planning to take me for everything." Lisa looked like she was about to cry. I don't even know what to say. Mike's been acting weird lately, but I never thought. I mean, he's your best friend. And Emily, she's always been so sweet to me. She's not who we thought she was," I said, my jaw tightening. Lisa stared into her cup, her hands trembling. "Jake, if this is true, what do we do?" In that moment, something shifted. I looked at Lisa, really looked at her for the first time in years. She was beautiful, with soft brown eyes and a kindness that radiated even through her pain. And for the first time, I realized she was just as betrayed as I was. "They think they're untouchable," I said, my voice steady. "But they're not. We deserve better, Lisa. We deserve to take back control." Lisa looked up at me, her expression hardening. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we don't have to let them get away with this," I said, leaning in closer. "If they're going to betray us, why shouldn't we hit back where it hurts the most?" Her eyes widened as she realized what I was suggesting. "You mean, you and me?" "Why not?" I said, my voice filled with a bitter determination. "They've already destroyed everything. What's stopping us from finding some comfort in each other?" Lisa hesitated, her lips trembling. "Jake, I don't know if I can." But then, her expression changed. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, filled with a mix of anger and vulnerability. "Maybe you're right," she said softly. "Maybe they deserve it. We didn't plan it. It just happened. One minute we were sitting in that coffee shop, talking about how betrayed we felt, and the next, we were in my truck, parked behind a quiet stretch of woods, kissing like our lives depended on it." Lisa was everything Emily wasn't: warm, compassionate, and real. And for the first time in months, I felt alive. It wasn't just revenge. It was a connection, raw and unfiltered. When I dropped Lisa off at her house, she turned to me, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and relief. "What now?" she asked. "We don't tell anyone," I said firmly. "Not yet. We need to keep playing the game until we have enough to take them down." Lisa nodded, her hand resting on mine. "I'm with you, Jake." And just like that, we became allies in a war we hadn't asked to fight. Emily chose a Saturday morning to drop the bomb. I was in the garage, tinkering with my tools, trying to keep my mind off the chaos swirling in my life. The smell of grease and the hum of the radio were the only things keeping me grounded. That's when she walked in, her arms crossed and her face set in a mask of forced confidence. "We need to talk," she said, her tone clipped. I put the wrench down and wiped my hands on a rag, turning to face her. "What's up?" She didn't sit. She stood there, hovering near the door, like she was afraid to get too close. "Jake," she started, her voice wobbling just a bit. "I need to tell you something, and I don't want a big scene." My stomach clenched, but I kept my face blank. "Go on." She took a deep breath, her eyes darting around the room like she was rehearsing the script in her head. "I've been seeing someone else." There it was. The words hung in the air like smoke, choking the life out of the space between us. I didn't flinch. "Mike," I said flatly, not bothering to feign surprise. Her eyes widened, the mask cracking for a split second. You knew?" I crossed my arms, leaning back against the workbench. "I'm not an idiot, Emily." She hesitated, then pushed forward, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It's been going on for a while. We didn't mean for it to happen, but things between us, between you and me, they haven't been good for a long time. I needed someone who—" "Spare me the speech," I interrupted, my voice icy. "You're cheating on me with my best friend. That's all I need to know." Emily blinked, thrown off by my calmness. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Jake. I think we need to end this. I've already talked to a lawyer." My jaw tightened. "Oh, I know. The guy from the motel, right? You've been busy." Her face flushed with shock and guilt. "You followed me?" "Call it intuition," I said, my voice as cold as steel. She took a step closer, softening her tone. "Jake, I don't want this to get ugly. We can do this amicably, for the kids' sake. We can figure out a way to split everything fairly." At that I laughed. A bitter, humorless sound that echoed in the garage. "Amicably? Fairly? You think I'm just going to roll over while you and Mike stab me in the back?" Her eyes narrowed, her posture shifting into defensiveness. "I don't know what you're trying to prove, Jake, but this is happening. You can't stop it." I pushed off the workbench, stepping closer until we were eye to eye. "Oh, I'm not trying to stop it, Emily. You've made your bed. But let me tell you something, you and Mike are going to regret every single choice you've made." Her confidence faltered, just for a moment. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, my voice low and steady, "you have no idea who you're messing with." Emily left the garage without another word, but her tension was palpable. She thought she had the upper hand, but she didn't know the game I was playing. Later that day, I texted Lisa. "It's done." She admitted it. "They think they've won." Her reply came almost instantly. "They don't know what's coming. Let's make them pay." That night, as Emily slept in the guest room, I sat in the living room with a glass of whiskey, staring at the divorce papers she'd left on the kitchen counter. She thought she was in control. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days after Emily's confession were oddly calm, at least on the surface. She acted like she'd won some kind of victory, walking around with this quiet arrogance, like the divorce was already a done deal. But I wasn't the broken man she thought I was. Lisa and I were in constant contact, texting, calling, meeting in secret. It started with venting, both of us pouring out our anger and hurt, but it quickly turned into something deeper. One evening, Lisa invited me over to her place. Mike was working late, which we both knew was code for sneaking off to be with Emily. I brought over a bottle of wine, and we sat on her back patio, the warm glow of string lights casting shadows on the walls. I still can't believe this is happening, Lisa said, swirling her wine. Mike and we weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. And Emily? She's been like a sister to me for years. How do you even process that kind of betrayal? You don't, I said, leaning back in my chair. You just figure out how to survive it. Lisa looked at me, her green eyes glistening with tears. I don't feel like I'm surviving. I feel lost. I reached across the table and took her hand. You're not alone, Lisa. We're in this together. She held my gaze for a long moment, then smiled, a small, sad smile that tugged at my heart. You're a good man, Jake, she said softly. Not as good as I used to be, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Before I knew it, we were leaning closer, the space between us disappearing. And then our lips met. It wasn't planned. It wasn't calculated. It was raw and real and electric, like we were clinging to each other in the middle of a storm. The next morning, I woke up in Lisa's bed. The sunlight streaming through the curtains felt warm against my skin, but it was nothing compared to the warmth of her body curled up next to mine. For the first time in weeks, I felt peaceful. But the moment was short-lived. We both knew the battle wasn't over. While Lisa and I were finding solace in each other, Emily and Mike's perfect little plan was starting to crumble. One evening, after Emily had dropped the kids off at my parents' house, I overheard her on the phone with Mike. What do you mean you're not sure? She hissed, her voice low but furious. I stood quietly in the hallway, straining to hear. Mike's voice was muffled on the other end, but I caught the words. I didn't think it would get this messy. Messy? Emily snapped. You promised me this would be easy. You said Jake would fold, and Lisa would. I don't know, cry herself into submission or something. But now she's fighting back. Emily, calm down, Mike said, his tone defensive. You're the one who wanted to drag Jake through the mud. I just wanted out of my marriage. You're the one pushing for the divorce, the lawyer, everything. Oh, don't you dare put this on me. Emily spat. You're the one who couldn't keep your hands to yourself. You're the one who... Don't act like you're innocent. Mike interrupted, his voice rising. You've been lying to Jake for months. What, you thought this would all just magically work out? That we'd ride off into the sunset? Emily's laugh was bitter, almost a snarl. Oh, please. You were so eager to be with me, Mike. Don't act like you're some victim now. Their argument continued, their voices growing louder and angrier. It was delicious to hear. I crept back to the living room, a smirk tugging at my lips. They were already turning on each other, their perfect little betrayal crumbling under the weight of its own deceit. Later that night, I texted Lisa. They're fighting. It's only a matter of time before it all falls apart. Her reply came quickly. Good. They deserve each other. And we deserve better. I stared at her message, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. The cracks in Emily and Mike's little fairy tale had turned into full-blown chasms. Their arguments were no longer whispers over the phone, they were fights in public. Emily came home late one night, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the picture frames. Everything okay, sweetheart? I called out, dripping with sarcasm. Shut up, Jake, she snapped, storming past me and into the guest room. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. The plan was already in motion, and soon enough, she and Mike would be reaping what they'd sown. The next morning, Lisa and I put the final touches on our revenge. I had gathered everything, screenshots of Emily and Mike's texts, proof of her secret meetings with the lawyer, even a recording of their motel argument that I'd managed to capture on a little gadget Lisa had gifted me. She had collected her own arsenal. Bank statements showing Mike had been quietly siphoning money from their joint account, and more texts that painted a crystal-clear picture of their betrayal. We weren't just going to blow this thing up. We were going to scorch the earth. That evening, we invited Mike and Emily over for dinner. Why the hell would I come to dinner with him? Emily had scoffed earlier when I suggested it. Because it's for the kids, I said, playing the concerned dad. They've been asking why things have been weird lately. Let's act normal for once. She reluctantly agreed, and Mike was easier to convince. He had no idea what was coming. When the four of us sat down at the table that night, the tension was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Emily was quiet, her eyes darting between me and Lisa. Mike, on the other hand, looked a little too smug, like he thought he was getting away with everything. So, I said, setting my fork down and leaning back in my chair. How are things, Mike? Business going well? Yeah, can't complain, he said, taking a sip of his beer. And Emily? Lisa chimed in, her tone sweet but laced with venom. How's work been? Still staying late for all those important projects? Emily froze, her eyes narrowing. What's this about? Oh, nothing, I said casually. Just curious. You've both been so busy lately. Mike glanced at Emily, a flicker of nervousness crossing his face. That's when I dropped the bomb. I know about the affair, I said, my voice calm but cutting. And so does Lisa. The color drained from Emily's face. Mike choked on his drink. What are you talking about? Emily stammered, her voice shaking. Oh, come on, Emily, Lisa said, leaning forward with a smirk. Let's not insult each other's intelligence. She pulled out her phone and placed it on the table, screen up. We've got the texts, the photos, the motel visits. Should I keep going? Mike's face turned red, his jaw tightening. This is ridiculous, he snapped. Ridiculous? I said, raising an eyebrow. What's ridiculous is the two of you thinking we wouldn't find out. But don't worry, we didn't just find out. We made sure to gather all the evidence. Every lie, every betrayal. It's all documented. You've got nothing, Emily hissed, her confidence faltering. I reached under the table and pulled out the divorce papers she'd been hiding in her bag. I tossed them onto the table, the stack landing with a satisfying thud. Oh, but I do, I said, leaning in close. You thought you'd blindside me, but I've been playing the long game, sweetheart. And guess what? You lose. Lisa wasn't done. She turned to Mike, her voice icy. And you? You think you're walking out of this unscathed? Think again. I've already filed for divorce. My lawyer is going to have a field day with everything I've got on you. Mike looked stunned, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. You're crazy, he finally spat, glaring at me. You think you're going to come out of this looking clean? You're just as pathetic as she is. I laughed, a cold, bitter laugh that made him flinch. Oh, I don't care how I come out of this, Mike. All I care about is making sure you and Emily get exactly what you deserve. The fallout was swift and brutal. Emily tried to play the victim during the divorce proceedings, but my lawyer tore her apart with the mountain of evidence I'd collected. She walked away with nothing but the bare minimum, and the judge made it clear she was lucky to get even that. As for Mike, Lisa didn't hold back. She drained him dry, taking the house, the savings, and even his beloved car. I heard through mutual friends that Emily and Mike tried to make a go of it after everything came out, but it didn't last long. The foundation of their relationship was built on lies and betrayal, and it crumbled just as quickly as our marriages had. Meanwhile, Lisa and I started seeing each other more openly. What began as a shared sense of betrayal turned into something real, something that felt honest and true in a way either of our previous relationships ever had. One night, as we sat on her back patio, watching the stars, she turned to me with a smile. You know, she said, resting her head on my shoulder, I used to think revenge was a waste of energy. I chuckled, wrapping my arm around her. And now? No, she said, kissing my cheek. I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. It's been a year since the fallout. The dust has settled, the wounds have started to heal, and life looks a lot different than it did back then. Emily moved to a new city shortly after the divorce. She still sees the kids, but our arrangement is strictly business. She doesn't call unless it's about them, and I keep it that way. From what I hear, things between her and Mike didn't work out, they broke up a few months after everything came to light. Apparently, they couldn't trust each other. Imagine that. As for Mike, he's been keeping a low profile. Word spread quickly about what he did, and our old friends didn't take kindly to his betrayal. Last I heard, he's renting a small apartment and working some mediocre job. Lisa and I? We're good. Better than good, actually. What started as revenge turned into something neither of us expected. Lisa's more than just someone who understands my pain, she's become my partner in every sense of the word. We're taking things slow for now, focusing on our kids and building a new life together, but it feels right. The other day, we took the kids to the park, all of them running around together like they'd always been one big family. Watching them laugh and play, I realized something. I'd spent so much time being angry, plotting revenge, that I almost forgot what it felt like to just live. Lisa grabbed my hand as we watched from the bench, her smile warm and real. "They're happy," she said softly. "So am I replied. And for the first time in years I meant it. If I've learned anything from all this, it's that betrayal doesn't define you. It doesn't have to destroy you. It hurts like hell, sure, but it also teaches you who you are, and who really has your back. Emily and Mike thought they could tear me down, but they only made me stronger. And in the end, they lost everything while I found something I didn't even know I was looking for, a chance to start over. If you're going through something similar, just remember, you're stronger than you think. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't about hurting the people who wronged you. It's about finding happiness in spite of them. Thanks for listening, Reddit. If you like this story, make sure you subscribe channel and like it. Stay strong.